I started covering them.
All right, guys. I apologize for the delay in starting. For some reason, the computer speakers, the speakers are not working specifically for videos that I want to show. And I had a couple of videos I wanted to show in today's class that actually helped clarify some explanations. I guess we're going to go without those and kind of try to do our best work without them. Hopefully I didn't ask a quiz question on them. I guess the good news is if I cast a quiz question on them, it's very easy for you to say, all right, well, we didn't get to watch that video, Dr. Barnes. That's points back. Yeah, we've had some very interesting technology issues. So those of you who remember from 417, IDEA has just stopped working on the campus computers, just like flat stop. I've had some students who just they spent like hours in frustration trying to get it to boot up. And so that's been what I've been dealing with, which it's not great when you're the technology instructor for the accounting program and the technology refuses to work. And yeah. Apparently personal issues too. But Holden, is the entire soccer team sick now?
Yeah.
Because John and Colin are online today, which was an interesting email this morning because Colin said send me an email. Says, oh, Colin's sick and John's not, like 5 minutes later, you know. And like that. So hopefully they have speedy recovery and do not have the same thing that Holden had. I did want to talk a little bit. I've received some questions about the semester project, and some people have expressed concerns, which is good because it means you're thinking about it. But some people have asked, what is the approach to doing this? And I want to just give you some tips. Obviously, I think the best approach, if you're really, really unsure about things, come talk to me in my office and I can give you some guidance. There's quite a wide variety of ways that you can approach this particular project, but I think that there's two directions you can start from. The first direction is probably the most obvious direction, is to figure out something that is you're personally interested in, and obviously has to relate to accounting and business, or education, accounting, business, something thereof, and see if you can find data that relates to that. That may be a challenge, but if you do enough digging, then the answer is probably you can find something that will at least moderately relates to it and that you can work through. I gave you some links to look through. There's tons and tons of data out there. The problem is not finding the data. The problem is that finding where the data is. That, I guess, it's not whether the data exists. It's what the capacity that you want the data to exist in. Barring that, you can actually try to reverse engineer this process as well. Instead of saying, all right, what am I interested in, and trying to dig for the data, you can actually just go look at the data first and say, is there something out of this data that I'm personally interested in that I would do a research project over? If you don't have any particular strong passionate feelings one way or the other about what you want to do your research project on, I would encourage this approach simply because it's a lot easier to figure out a question from the data rather than the find data to answer a question. Again, if you have a really, really strong passion for a particular project and you really want to do analysis of that, something to consider is that you can create your own questionnaire and you can send questionnaires out to the lovely people in this room. And the good news is that they can't refuse you because I control their grades. All right. So, and we can actually probably get that questionnaire out to other students as well on campus, not just the School of Business. That does take a lot more planning and a lot more advanced work. So if that's something you want to do, think about in advance. The other thing, I didn't really provide a lot of context for it, but the AI queries, the example that I'm kind of used for this is kind of an example that's been discussed before. There's a researcher at BYU, very well-known researcher, who actually ran a series of projects to see if ChatGPT could pass the CPA exam. The answer was at first no. Okay, ChatGPT scored a 35% or 35, I guess 35% because they can't grade on the same way that the AICPA grades them. They got 35% of the questions right. It was kind of just basically hit or miss. It was guessing a lot of things. The upgraded versions actually did pass the exam with reasonable scores. So that's something to consider as well. That could even just be a comparison if you have other topic areas that you want to say, all right, what is the difference between advanced versions of advanced versions of AI versus old versions of AI? That's something that you can explore. It's a little bit tricky to do because currently the way ChatGPT works is that you have a limited amount of questions that you can ask ChatGPT 4.0, and then it reverts to ChatGPT 3.5, which is the old version. I do think Copilot, the way that we have the the subscription setup right now is that defaults to ChatGPT 4.0. That's kind of the default query tool that they use. It's just a different tool that's actually doing the querying. So that will always be in a high level advanced discussion. Anyway, hopefully that helps you consider what you can actually do in this project. I know it seems like I've talked a lot about this, but time is very, very short on making decisions on this one. It seems like, oh, it's week 5. I've still got three weeks before I even have to make a decision. Need to really be making the decision now so that you can find the information, the detail that you need. So, those of you who are thinking about it, thank you very much for taking it seriously. Those of you who have not thought about it yet, get cracking. That's going to be my advice for you. All right. So today, talk about IT standards, and we're going to be doing information technology discussion without some pieces of the information technology I want to go into. Again, these first few weeks are going to be a little bit dry, a little bit boring. I don't know why that's the trend with my AIS classes, is that I start out really, really slow. I guess maybe if I were a little bit smarter, I would start out strong and then go down a little bit and then finish strong. But no, I just basically say, let's get this bad stuff out of the way first, and then we'll get to the interesting stuff later on. This is not a particularly fun topic to talk about simply because it is just detail oriented. There's a lot more we can go in depth with. I've thought about some different ways to approach these particular discussions, but this is about as far as I'm willing to go on this one. Believe me when I say that it seems like there's going to be a lot of repetition of similar thoughts and concerns, but there are some very important takeaways here. So I do think this is worthwhile, and it will be something that you will encounter in the future, particularly as we see more evolution in this area. I do think that we're probably going to see a substantial increase in the number of governance frameworks as we start to identify more threats and more concerns in those areas, or at the very least, even if not more frameworks, more development of the existing frameworks to where they become more complex and answer more questions. All right, so let's see. First thing I want you to do is I want you to do some deep drilling on ISO. So our ISO 27000 series. So actually, I think I asked you some questions about specifically ISO and said, can you provide me some context on those? And see, give me just a second because I had a document pulled up and then it just shut down on my iPad. The technology is just not working with me at all today. This is going to be the technology fail course this semester. And it's not anybody's fault except for my own. And so yeah, we're almost there. Okay, so I want you to do some drilling down on ISO. So, but by the way, what does ISO stand for? Does anybody figure that out? I don't think this is a question on there, but I was curious if anybody figured out. It's just ISO, 3 letters, Dr. Barnes. It doesn't stand for anything. It stands for the International Organization for Standardization. All right, which you may say that doesn't make any sense. That's iOS. And say, first of all, iOS is an operating system, but why is it ISO? And the answer, I don't have a really good answer for this. I should probably do some more drilling on or digging on this and figure out what's going on. But International Standardization or International Organization for Standardization, that it's actually a European organization or European conglomerate, and I say conglomerate because it's made up of a bunch of standard setting bodies across the world, but it's headquartered in Europe. So there's probably a European translation, one of the European languages where it actually, the wording is letter I, letter O, letter S, which is, or letter I, letter S, letter O. So it's why it's ISO. That's probably more information than we need to go into in detail, but that's what I'm starting with. So ISO, and then I said, what is the name of the US body? So actually, first of all, according to the ISO website, how many national standard bodies are members? Let's go ahead and start out at the top. So Kirsten, your group was first. How many standard setting bodies did you all identify?
We had 172.
172, and yeah, so yeah, I believe that was updated term. I'm looking at an old document right now. It said there was, I believe that's what I found as well. And we'll stay with you, Kirsten. What is the name of the U.S. standards body?
I mean, I don't know how to pronounce it. I just said like ANSI or
yeah, ANSI. So it stands for American National Standards Institute. So yeah, if you go down, drill down a little bit, it tells you about us, and then you can click on that 172. And it kind of gives you some information about the details, and you can kind of see the ANSI. I believe that if you click on the graph, it actually tells you a little bit more about the United States. So some easy ways. I do like the way their dashboard is set up because it's very easy to drill down on that. Okay, so according to the standard section of the ISO website, so let's go ahead and go to that. And I can scroll down, but I'm going to wait until I actually talk to somebody. So according to the standard section of the website, aside from information technology, what business processes do ISO standards cover? Colin, you on with us today?
Yeah,
All right. So what does your group say on this one?
we had quality management, environmental management, health and safety, and energy management.
Okay. Is that it?
Food and safety.
Yeah, food safety standards. Okay. Yeah, so that screen says yes. Okay. Yeah. But yeah. So what can we say about ISOs? Looks like they've got a set of standards that's quite a bit more diverse than just information technology. So this is not a purely information technology governance body. This is a body that actually deals with standards across a broad array of areas. And you know, I think these are all things that are very, very important and relevant to business and business operations. For example, we can probably talk about health and safety standards because we know that those are very relevant to people who work in the accounting workplace. You know, all the heavy lifting that we do, and you know the amount of physical exertion, and nobody's really paying attention to me right now because I'm making a very, very silly joke, okay, which is not getting any reaction. No, obviously, when we talk about accounting, health and safety standards are relevant because they're the fear of paper cuts. Okay, there's the worry about paper cuts, and obviously, when we talk about that, we're talking about other areas that have high stress and high risk areas. So we can say that there's definitely some risk concerns when we talk about governance in other areas that are very relevant. So I personally am kind of gratified that there's somebody who's kind of setting the standards and looking at this, and he set the stage for standards that are done at the local area. So these are international standards that kind of dictate how standards are set even at the domestic level. So whether we talk about the United States or whether we talk about regions within the USA. Okay, so moving on, we're going to talk about COBIT now, and we're going to jump back to this. So according to the COBIT article, what version of COBIT is currently in use? All right, so I have to scroll down again. I am really not prepared. I just the whole sound thing caught me on tilt. Tyler, your group is up. So
COVID 2019.
COVID 2019. Boy, does anybody think that that was a really unfortunate time to actually update COVID? Like you guys said, what did you study? What did you study in AIS today? It says, oh, we studied COVID-19. It says, oh yeah, that was tragic. No, COVID 2019. Yeah, so yeah, and I will say I have said COVID 2019 probably 100 or so times over the times that we talked about this. I definitely have said something other than COVID 2019 a few times just because of the natural inclination to do so. So yeah, COVID 2019. As far as what states in the paragraphs, there's one major difference is what is COVID designed to do and what is it not designed to do. So we'll stick with Tyler on the first question. What is COVID designed to do, Tyler?
Focus on security, risk management, and governance.
So it's a focus on security, risk management, and information governance. All right, three things that sound like that if we haven't really done our first, or we didn't do our first lecture, we'd say, oh yeah, that makes sense, Dr. Barnes, and we just keep nodding our head like a bobblehead, okay? All right, our security, risk management, and information governance is the same thing. I mean, security and risk management, we can say, are very closely related. Information governance, is that the same thing? Now let's go back. So to go back to last week, I know it was a few days ago, okay? So on Friday, we said, what is the overall goal of IT governance? Is it addressing risk? That's a component of it, but what was the primary?
Optimized business.
Yeah, so deliver risk optimized business value. So I think the term focus is a little bit of a misnomer in this context because we're not focusing on one area. We're actually talking about the broad spectrum of information technology governance. Now, knowing what we know about COVID already, because we talked about it last week, does that make sense? I think it does, because remember last week we talked about COVID was a very high level, very broad focus. And we're going to see more of that next week. We're going to actually take a look at a diagram that's going to kind of compare and contrast some of our standards. But yeah, so COVID, saying it focuses on something, again, it's a little bit of a challenge simply because it's not really a focus. It's more of kind of a broad context discussion or a broad context analysis of these issues. But there are some things that COVID is not designed to do, right? And I picked on Tyler enough, so I'm going to move on Dottie, okay? Because I haven't picked on Dottie at all this semester. All right, Dottie, what's your group saying this one? Oops. What is COVID not designed to do?
COVID is not designed for managing technology, making IT decisions, determining IT strategies and architecture, and organizing business processes.
All right, so what do those have in common? If we tried to compare those to the first one, so the first one was saying evaluation of security, risk management, and IT governance, okay? And then COVID is not a framework for organizing business processes, managing technology, making IT-related decisions, or determining IT strategies or architecture. What's the difference? I mean, if we just kind of read those, if we read those, we'd say, well, those sound very, very similar, Dr. Barnes. There's a big distinction between those. There's a big distinction. When we talk about which is more specific, would you say the first series of statements of what COVID is designed to do, would you say that's more specific? Or would you say what COVID is not designed to do is more specific? What this not designed to do is more specific, okay? In other words, what we're trying to get to the case is like COVID is actually trying to give us a broad view of what needs to be addressed in an organization, but it's not telling us what or how to do it. It's not telling us what needs to be done, specifically how to approach these particular problems. Okay, so this is reminiscent. The only reason I bring this up is because I actually talked about this in my auditing class recently. This is reminiscent of talking about materiality back in 417. So I know it's been a while since some of you have talked about materiality, but remember when we talked about that back in 417, we said PCOB says you have to address materiality, but they're not going to tell you what you need to do and how to do it. And I remember I said that was really frustrating because they don't give you any guidance. So COVID is kind of in the same regard, and this is going to be a really important point as we lead on, something we've already kind of discussed already, but we're going to reiterate a little bit more today, is that COVID serves a specific function. It's not a broad, comprehensive, encompassing function. It doesn't actually address all of the issues. It says we're going to be, I guess for lack of a better term, focused on this area, and that area is kind of broad context decisions. All right, so moving from there, we're going to talk about ITIL. Okay, so we talked about the last week, but what does ITIL stand for? Okay, and I do have my list now, so I can actually bring up names. Leah, your group is up. So what did you all identify for ITIL?
IT infrastructure library.
IT infrastructure library. What version of ITIL is currently in use?
ITIL 4.
ITIL 4, which creates some problems as we're going to talk about the 7 guiding principles. It doesn't seem like this is the 7 guiding principles. If you look in the article, it says, what are the ITIL 4 guiding principles? And you're looking for 4 principles, and then all of a sudden there's 7 listed. Did anybody else get confused by that? Yeah, it took me a second. I had to like and check it out. All right, so we're going to compare and contrast this to what we talked about with COVID. But according to the ITIL article, what is the primary focus of this version of the ITIL framework? And Leah, we'll stick with you.
Kind of a combination of all 3 of our responses. Like the main focus is still providing, obviously, IT service management to deliver risk optimized business value, but it's a more flexible, modern version. So it's a little updated.
Yeah. So we do have an updated version of ITIL, and this is by the important distinction because we are going to do some activities in this course where we're going to be looking at older versions of the same frameworks that we're going to talk about. This is because the cases themselves are older, so they were operating on older terms. But in general, it's still the same. It's still the same focus. All right. IT service management. Now, can we say that IT service management is a little bit more distinct in what it's trying to address than what we talked about with COVID? COVID was saying IT governance. All right. That's ultimately our takeaway of COVID, which is not a very satisfying answer because IT governance is very broad. Can we say that ITIL is a lot more specific in what it tries to address? Say, all right, here's the mechanisms that you're going to use to actually deliver a value to your organization and to their stakeholders. Again, IT service management. How do we actually provide the services that are necessary within the organization? How do we employ IT to provide those services? So again, very, very important distinction to make is that it's actually going to be very focused in that regard. All right, so then I had you do some drilling. I want you guys to do some drill down and actually provide some hyperlink. So let's go ahead and click on the hyperlink for IT security standards. Approximately how many standards are in the ISO 27000 family? Brock, what's your group say on this one?
Approximately 25 standards.
Okay. Yeah, so it's not really specific on this because it says more than a dozen, all right? It says, that's really not all that focused, but you can actually drill down and find some more information on there. And the interesting thing is if you click on that, it says check 25 standards. This number has not stayed consistent. And this is something only the person who's taught this particular topic for 4 or 5 years would know. It's very, very inconsistent as to how many standards there are. I suppose I could answer this question by actually buying the ISO framework, and maybe that's what we'll do, is that for a project in this course, I'll buy it and we'll all read it together, okay? Yeah, we're not doing that. The ISO 27000 series, it's more than a dozen, but around 25. So I think 25 is probably a good answer. Again, this number has varied in the past. If you go back to the video, which you can't do, not listed on YouTube right now, but if you go back to the video, last year this number said 50. So I don't know what happened, if they just suddenly chopped out 25 standards and said, we're going to streamline a little bit more, or if there was a replication of that information. But I think we can safely say more than a dozen. This is not a satisfying answer. It's a little bit like that old default that I always use whenever you can't answer a question in any accounting course, especially at the graduate level. What are the 2 words that you always say? It depends. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And so, by the way, use that liberally in your other courses. Use that liberally in other courses, because that will get you out of them. So yes, it depends, but what specific information I'm looking for? I can't help you out after they ask that question, but you can actually wait, or you can actually kind of vamp for a little bit of time with Dr. Otero and Dr. Caden if they ask you a difficult question. Again, scratch your chin. That's the answer. Okay, moving forward. So we were going to go down a little bit and deal with the standard itself. So let's see here, and then I want you to read the sample. And we can actually look at this before. And one of the things, I made the joke about buying this, and I said, it would be really nice if I could actually see the entire standard and ask questions other than just kind of what we are exposed to. And I thought, there's no way I could do it. It's probably like thousands of dollars, and people buy this for organizations, really large organizations to use. It's actually like $125. So, I flirted with the idea of making this like a required reading, including this as one of your textbooks. I haven't done that, but I thought about that idea. I think that this might actually be one of those things that Dr. Caden might actually finance if I actually requested it. The kitchen in the classroom, she's not behind that, but she might be behind the ISO 27000 series. That being said, we're not going to talk about the ISO 27000 series in that much detail. So what do these actually represent? So together, they enable organizations of all sectors and sizes to manage security of assets such as financial information, intellectual property, employee data, information entrusted by third parties. All right, so the ISO 27000 series characterizes the ISMS family standards. What does ISMS stand for? I think we've talked about this already, but I want to make sure that we're clear on this. AJ, what's your group say on this one?
Information Security Management System.
Information Security Management System. Is this a distinction from ITIL? So again, COBIT, IT governance, okay? Very, very broad concept. ITIL, we already decided ITIL is going to be information, or IT service management. Is ISO 27002, does it have the same focus as ITIL? I would say ITIL is more probably focused on the value, because it talked about how we can use IT to provide service for the organization. What is what would we say the focus for ISO 27000 series would be? Security, okay, and security addresses that 4-letter R word that we'd like to talk about. Risk, okay, and risk is something we're all very familiar with because we've talked about controls in many classes before. So again, are they related? Absolutely. Do they have the same focus? No, they don't. They do have different focuses on what it is they're trying to address. So we're going to be looking for vernacular that relates to risk. We want to say this is something that we're concerned about related to security, related to risk. I want you to go down and I want you to look at this in terms of definitions. And again, I would love to get into section 4 and go into the detail on that, but unfortunately that's all blanked out. So I said, as far as we can go is the terms and definitions here. So let's look at this very first term, access control. So access control obviously has to do with physical access to a system, or even logistical access to a system, and addresses a particular type of risk that we're concerned about, because controls are going to be a response to risk. That was the term that I taught you guys when we first started talking about controls. That's what I'm sticking to. So moving it on, we got the word audit. Okay, we'll get past that as quickly as possible. All right. What are some other ones? Confidentiality. Let's see if we can find this. It's another one. integrity. Also, I'm gonna see if it's still up there. Availability. So confidentiality, integrity, availability. Some of you may not be familiar with that. Some of you should be. Does anybody remember those terms at all? So specifically, those of you who took AIS with me last fall, does remember seeing those terms come up? We call that the CIA triad, all right? And that is actually one of the big focuses of ISO 27000 series, is that it's trying to make sure that when we provide information that it's actually going to be secure in the regards that it's confidential, that the information has full integrity, that it's not been compromised in any way, and that it's available, that it's not been prevented from being accessed by parties who should have access to it. So the reason I bring that up, by the way, is that we are going to see these terms a little bit later in the course, but I wanted to bring that up now. I realize the CIA triad is kind of a weird term for it. The joke that I make in AIS, and it's never gone over funny, is that CIA triad sounds like a governmental agency of the U.S. fighting against a crime organization, but that is what they call it online. Is if you look up the CIA triad, that's what you'll find. All right. So question then being, do these terms adequate, clever terminology related to ISMS? Well, obviously, there's a lot more terms than the ones we went over, but just at the basic level of what we went into. AJ, what did your group think?
Yeah, we said yes because they cover a very broad range of the terminology relating to the ISMS, and that the descriptions go almost like overly in depth.
Yeah, and so keep in mind that this is a standard that's going to be governing people's security management systems of their organization. So they have to be very, very detailed as to what this means. And there's probably a reason why there's more than a dozen or around 25 standards, is because we're trying to answer all possible questions. At a very general level, though, I think some of these terms are very, very intuitive. These are things that we would consider to be important in risk governance over an information technology system. Okay, going back to COVID now. Current version of COVID was updated to include focus areas. What are some of the examples of these focus areas? We're going to go back to group one, which would be Kirsten.
Concepts that describe specific governance topic and issues which can be addressed by management or governance of them. The examples we said: small and medium enterprises, cybersecurity, digital transformation, and cloud computing.
Yeah. So small and medium enterprises, cybersecurity, digital transformation, and cloud computing. These are all concepts that we're going to be discussing to varying degrees within this course. So this leads to an interesting question. Why is this an important characteristic of COVID? What's your group say on that one, Kirsten?
We said because times are constantly changing, COVID is like flexible in their approach and adapting to those changes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's the old vernacular, the only thing that's constant is change. And I think that we can say specifically with respect to information technology, the past 2 decades have seen a massive amount of change. And some of those things that encompass those change are going to be the areas that we're talking about here. So first of all, many of these standards were set for one size fits all enterprise. Now, can we say that small and medium enterprises, they have as much complexity as large enterprises? Probably not. But do they have their own types of complexity? Absolutely. And small and medium enterprises interact quite frequently now with larger enterprises out there in the real world. So having rules for how to govern a smaller organization is probably really important. Cybersecurity and cloud computing, these are 2 things that 20 years ago, they existed, but definitely not to the same degree that we see nowadays. Most organizations operate very liberally off of cloud service providers, simply because there are advantages to being able to have kind of the constant storage that you can access from many points. And we all know cybersecurity. We've heard the discussions. We all experienced it. Like it was a year and a half ago that some of you were actually sitting in the classroom with me. I had to say, Dr. Barnes, shut the computer down right now. Somebody in this actual class that told me to do that. Okay. So yeah, cybersecurity, definitely an issue, definitely a threat that we had to address back then. And then, of course, digital transformation. This is something that we've alluded to, and we're going to continue to allude to, especially as we talk about data management. We're going to see a lot more of our world take place online, especially as we start developing smart tools and artificial intelligence that can actually interpret information that's not necessarily binary or even just language models. Okay, so kind of what Kirsten said is really important to take away, is that as we evolve, we need to actually be able to have standards that can actually address that evolution. So some concerns here is we need to have adaptive standards that aren't necessarily going to say, we got a one size fits all standard, and it's never going to adapt. It's static. Like, no, we need to have standards that can actually address different perspectives and different issues and different concerns. All right. The 7 guiding principles of ITIL, all right? And I say 7 guiding principles. It used to be 9, by the way. They've actually moved down. But again, what I was talking about before, what are the ITIL? And it says 4 guiding principles. And you see it says 4. It's like, no, that's ITIL 4 guiding principles. Yes. So 7 guiding principles here. And I don't really want to go through every single one of these, but there were some questions that I had you consider with respect to this. So which of these principles do you feel are most consistent with the primary focus of ITIL that you identified in question 4? So we identified the primary focus of being IT service management. That's ITIL's focus. It's going to be focusing on generating shareholder value to stakeholders through IT services. Which of these do you think is most important? I think one of these is probably more obvious than the other, but Colin, what did your group say on this one?
We chose focus on value because the primary focus of ITIL is providing quality IT systems and service.
Yes.
And then we said these are consistent with the article's objective because they focus value and collaboration.
Yeah. So the next question was, are these principles consistent with the artist's stated objective of integrating the overall business structure, encouraging collaboration between IT and other departments? So yes, I believe they're consistent, and I think that there's some really, really big clues there. So first of all, focus on value, I think, is the obvious one that was going to be the biggest takeaway for IT service management, given that the whole goal of IT governance is to provide stakeholder value through the IT or use of IT and IT service management. That's its focus. That's basically what it's intending to do, is to generate value. That being said, the other six guiding principles are there for a reason. So what are some things that we can take away from that? Well, first of all, if you look at number 4, it says collaborate, promote visibility. What do we know about transparency within an organization? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? So if people in the organization don't know what the other people are doing, can they do their jobs effectively? If you answered yes, then I'm going to have you read Bad Blood by John Carreyrou, which is about the Theranos debacle. I actually used to have my students read that. I may still actually, Jason, you read that, didn't you? Yeah. Good book, right? Yeah. Okay. All right. So, and then think and work holistically. So has anybody heard the term holistically or holistic before? It's like holistic medicine, Dr. Barnes. It's great. Yeah. There is holistic medicine and it's great, but that's not what we're talking about here. What does the word holistic mean? So it's going to sound awful, okay? But you take the first part, whole, and I'm not talking about HOLE. I'm talking about on the whole, WHOLE. Holistic is basically consideration of how actions and opportunities affect the greater being, okay? And in this situation, we're talking about the enterprise, the organization that we're dealing with. We're talking about holistic medicine. They're talking about how one action affects the entire body, which is kind of why it's used as holistic medicine in that. The only reason I bring that up is to try to give you context for that so you can remember what it is if I ask you that question in the future. Hint, hint. All right. But that being said, I think all of these are going to be very important components, but there are ones that are very, very focused on how IT affects the entire organization, how it affects the organization's operations as a whole. So those are some things we need to take away from the principles, is that the principles can't just be compartmentalized just to one area, just to accounting, just to business. Our actions are going to have effects on the organization and opportunities that are present there. All right. This one's an interesting question. So question number 9 is IT literature in a few instances of this course use the term IT governance framework and IT control framework interchangeably to describe ITIL. And this is actually true for all of our frameworks that we're going to talk about. In fact, next week, our discussion topic is called IT controls. And you're going to say, all right, so we're going to need something different. And then you're going to see COBIT, ITIL, and ISO 27002 again. All right. That implies that to some degree, these all relate to controls. These all relate to control concepts. And they use the terms interchangeably to describe ITIL, which ITIL is not really control focused, it's service focused. But based on what we learned about ITIL, which of these terms is most appropriate, and then why or why not, if either is the most appropriate. So let's just go ahead and talk very briefly. I want to talk about which one's most appropriate, and then we're going to try to figure out why. Tyler, which one did you say is probably most appropriate?
I said IT control framework.
IT control framework. Why'd you come up with that?
Well, at first I thought it was gonna be government, but I think after like talking about it, both like addressing risk for the ITL and the IT control framework, they're both more focused on the risk. That's what I think.
Okay, and so I think there's an argument to be made on both sides. I think Tyler makes a good point is that when ITIL is there is that you cannot actually provide good value and good service unless you have addressed the risks that are present in the organization. That being said, we can also make the point that IT service is set distinct from IT security. That was something that I made a point of earlier. So the answer is, which is more appropriate? If either, you can make arguments in all directions. You could say IT governance is more appropriate, IT control framework is most appropriate. Neither of these is appropriate. What is the distinction between IT governance and IT controls? That's an important point to make. Can we say that IT controls are a part of IT governance? Would that be a fair statement? Can we say that it's possible to have good IT governance without good IT controls? In other words, can you provide anything, any kind of good services? Can you provide stakeholder value if you have no security whatsoever? I mean, a lot of people are kind of indistinct on this. I see a few people that are kind of shaking their heads and they're like very, very tentative. I'd say very emphatically, not in this day and age. Okay. If you think about it this way, if you decided that you were going to get a nice collection of something, like say you collected baseball cards or coins or something like that, and you held those in your house and you're just really, really proud of how much valuable they take, what would you do with that collection? You'd probably have it secure someplace hidden in your room that people couldn't find it. And then at the very least, you'd lock your door and make sure your windows were locked when you left the house, okay, so people don't break in and steal your collection. Would it make sense to actually to obtain something valuable, to generate all this value, and then leave your door wide open and say, hey, and have a flashing neon sign in the living room, say, hey, if you want to steal something, my coin collection's in my bedroom. Does that make sense? Makes no intuitive sense whatsoever. So I think we have to say that controls are a component of governance. Does that mean controls are equivalent to governance? No, governance and controls are going to be very distinct. Governance as an overarching concern is going to be focused on that whole value concept. But I don't think we can generate value without controls. We can't generate value without security. All right. I guess you can try. I would not recommend the plan of a neon sign telling people where your valuables are. And if you're doing that right now, just stop. Just stop doing it. Okay. Last question. According to the COBIT article, COBIT best suits clients who use multiple frameworks. Is this consistent with everything we've learned about IT governance and control framework so far? Toddy, what's your group say on this one?
You said that using COBIT on its own is probably going to be pretty ineffective because COBIT's kind of designed to monitor the performance of other frameworks, especially in terms of like information security and risk management.
Good. Okay, and what about using ITIL in isolation? Would that be effective?
You said it would be more effective because it's kind of a best practices guide.
So there's some interesting takeaways. And so one of the things, so first of all, clarify, one of the reasons I wanted to show a YouTube video is because there's actually a video that shows how, talks about how these frameworks are frequently used in unison with one another. And that makes sense because think about some of the things we've talked about just today. We said COBIT is focused on security and risk management and IT governance, but it's very high level, okay? So it covers pretty much everything with respect to IT governance, but it doesn't really tell you how to answer these questions. When you identify an issue, how do you address those problems? ISO 27000 and ITIL, they actually can address those issues. If you identify problems, they have protocols in place saying, all right, here's how you set up an information security management system, okay? Here's how you set up an IT infrastructure library so you can provide better service management. But they are very, very distinct. They only provide those services in those areas. So you kind of need all of these to be able to address the problem. You need to have the entire picture. You'd have all of these in place. Now, is it possible that as an organization you could only need one or two of these? Possible. It depends on the nature of the organization. If we're talking about smaller organizations, it's certainly probable that you could say, I'm not as concerned about security, but I'm very concerned about service delivery. So you may only want to have ITIL, or you may only want to have ISO if you're really concerned about a risky area. But for the most part, for the organizations we're going to talk about in this course, we're going to be very, very concerned about making sure that all approaches are discussed and all approaches are addressed. And that's why we're so focused on talking about these particular frameworks, because all of these frameworks will be relevant for something that we're going to encounter, whether it be big picture concerns, whether it be small picture concerns, detailing a specific area. That's kind of the goal of this discussion, is to say, here's what the focus of these frameworks are, and here's why it's important. All right, with that, I think we can call it good for today. Friday, we will have our first quiz at the beginning of class, and then we'll do our first Excel assignment. So I'll see y'all then.